What if your king, ruler of a mighty nation, suddenly believed his bones were made of glass? What if he locked himself in his chambers, afraid that one wrong move could shatter his body into 1,000 sharp pieces? This isn't a legend. This is a true story. Hundreds of years ago, one of Europe's most powerful monarchs fell into a strange and terrifying madness. He believed his body wasn't flesh and blood, but delicate, fragile glass. He refused to be touched. He wore special clothes to protect himself. He even stayed still for hours, terrified that moving too fast might break him. But why? What caused such a powerful man to fear something so bizarre? And perhaps more importantly, was he really mad, or was something darker happening behind palace walls? In today's video, we'll take you deep into one of the strangest medical mysteries in royal history. You'll hear about a king who ruled a nation, yet feared a simple bump could end his life. We'll explore the secret behind his delusion, the whispers in the palace, and the twisted games of power that surrounded his fall into madness. You'll also discover that he wasn't the only one. Others, princesses, noblemen, even soldiers, also believed they were made of glass. This condition wasn't just strange. It was once real enough to terrify the most powerful people in the world. As we dive deep into history, you'll not only know the name of this forgotten king, but you'll also understand how fear, power, and mystery shaped the last years of his life and changed a kingdom forever. So stay with us till the end, because the truth behind this glass king is more fragile and more dangerous than history dares to admit. His name was Charles VI of France, but history doesn't remember him for his victories, or his leadership, or even his battles. It remembers him for what he became, a king lost inside his own mind. He was born in 1368 into one of Europe's most powerful royal families. At just 11 years old, he became king. France was in the middle of chaos, wars, hunger, rebellion. But Charles was young, bright, and full of hope. People called him Charles the Beloved. For a time, he lived up to the name. He listened to good advice. He lowered taxes. He brought calm to a troubled land. For a few golden years, France saw peace. But then, things changed. Slowly, quietly, and then all at once. Charles began to act strangely. He forgot names. He lost his temper for no reason. He stared into space, unmoving, as if he didn't recognize the people in front of him. And then one day, it happened. He drew his sword and attacked his own men. His bodyguards, his friends, the people who had protected him for years. Nobody saw it coming. He had been riding with them for days. Nothing seemed wrong. Then, without a word, something snapped inside his mind. That was the moment France began to whisper. The king had gone mad. But madness wasn't something the royal court understood. Not really. There were no doctors for the mind. No words like schizophrenia or mental illness. Only fear. Only confusion. Only shame. So they locked the truth behind golden doors. And while the world believed Charles was still ruling, something else was happening in secret. His mind was falling apart, piece by piece, until he truly believed he was made of glass. How could this happen to a king? Was it sickness? A curse? Or something even worse? Something done to him? But perhaps the strangest part of his story was still to come. A medical mystery so rare and so eerie, it seemed to haunt only the minds of kings and nobles, and once you hear the details, you'll wonder, was King Charles truly insane? Or was his fear of breaking, hiding something that was already broken inside? It sounds impossible. A man believing his body is made of glass? But in the late Middle Ages, this fear was real. So real that it got a name, the glass delusion. It wasn't just Charles VI. Others, royal, rich, and educated, began to believe they, too, were made of fragile glass. They avoided people. They wouldn't sit down. Some even wore padded clothes to protect themselves from shattering. One nobleman sat on a cushion for hours every day. Another refused to touch anyone. A famous princess believed she had a glass piano inside her body. No one could explain it. No one dared to laugh. This wasn't madness, people said. This was fear. Deep, terrifying fear. And fear, in those times, could spread like fire. But why glass? Back then, glass was new, rare, magical. Most people had never even seen a glass window. The elite used glass to show wealth and beauty. But it was also cold, clear, easy to break. To believe your body was made of glass was to believe that you were special, and also terribly, painfully weak. Doctors at the time had no answers. They thought it was caused by melancholy, a dark sadness that lived in the body. Some tried herbs. Others prayed. Some even used cold baths or bloodletting. Nothing worked. People with this delusion lived in fear of being touched, pushed, or even looked at the wrong way. They hid from crowds. They refused to move. Just like King Charles. He once stayed frozen in place for hours, terrified to get up. He believed his hips would snap. That if he stood, he would fall into pieces like a broken wine glass. His servants had to carry him, wrap him in cloth, guide his steps carefully, like he was a statue made of crystal. This wasn't just strange, it was dangerous. Because while Charles lived in fear, France lived in chaos. The king was no longer leading. Others stepped in, nobles, family members, even enemies. And while they fought over power, Charles sat alone, afraid of breaking. But was the glass delusion just a random illness? Modern scientists believe it was something more, a mix of mental illness, trauma, and pressure. Kings, after all, weren't allowed to rest. They weren't allowed to fail. So when the pressure became too great, their minds found a strange way to escape. To believe you were glass was, in some twisted way, safer than facing the real world. But in Charles's case, this fear wasn't just a mental wound. It became a weapon. Whispers grew in the shadows of the palace. Some saw the king's silence as an opportunity. His fear made him easy to manipulate. And while Charles trembled at the thought of breaking, others were already breaking the kingdom, piece by piece. It didn't happen all at once. King Charles VI didn't wake up one day and declare himself made of glass. His madness crept in slowly, quiet as a shadow, until it swallowed him whole. At first, it was simple forgetfulness. He would stare at courtiers as if they were strangers. He forgot names, places, even faces he'd seen for years. Then came the rage. Outbursts with no warning. A feast interrupted by screams. A calm meeting turned into shouting. Once, he ordered the death of one of his own advisors, then seemed confused afterward, as if it had never happened. But the most terrifying moment came in the summer of 1392. Charles was riding through the forest with his men. The sun was bright. The path was clear. Suddenly, a stranger rushed up to the king's horse and shouted, "Don't go farther. You've been betrayed." The man was dragged away. The group laughed it off. But something inside the king snapped. Not long after, Charles drew his sword. Without saying a word, he turned on his closest guards, men who had ridden beside him for years, and began to strike them down. He killed 4 before others could stop him. When he came back to his senses, he didn't remember anything. From that day forward, the court began whispering. The king had lost his mind. And what followed was a slow, painful fall into madness. Charles would go silent for days. He didn't recognize his wife or children. Sometimes, he ran through the palace halls, wild-eyed, screaming that he was being hunted. Then came the glass. He began to tell his servants that he was made of fragile glass, that if someone touched him the wrong way, he would break. He ordered iron rods sewn into his clothing to protect his body from sudden movement. He refused to be touched, refused to be hugged, refused to sit on anything hard. He even banned certain people from being near him, in case they bumped into him by accident. Once, a maid tripped near him. She didn't even touch him, but he screamed, fell to the floor, and shook for hours, convinced his legs had shattered like a dropped vase. And yet, through all of this, he was still king. France had no rule for replacing a mad monarch. So, while Charles hid in his chambers, others took control. Nobles, advisors, and family members began fighting behind the scenes. They pushed their own plans, their own power. They used the king's madness like a shield, doing as they pleased while Charles sat alone in fear. Some historians believe they even encouraged his madness. Why? Because a weak king was easier to control than a strong one. Instead of helping him heal, they kept him isolated. Instead of doctors, they brought priests. Instead of comfort, they gave orders. It was easier that way. And all the while, Charles grew quieter, more afraid, more broken. He began to believe that people were trying to hurt him, that they wanted to smash his body like a wine glass, that even air was dangerous. He asked for windows to be sealed. He avoided mirrors. And then, he simply stopped talking. 4 days, even weeks, the king would say nothing. Just sit, eyes wide, breathing slow. His mind was no longer his own. And in the vacuum, France began to fall apart. Rebellions, civil war, foreign enemies growing bold. But the king was silent, wrapped in soft blankets, guarded like a priceless vase. He had become a ghost inside his own castle. And yet, even as his mind faded, some still believed there was more to this story. That this madness wasn't just illness. That it was part of a darker plan. Inside the palace, not all were loyal. Some stood close to the king, not to protect him, but to benefit from his silence. They watched. They waited. And they whispered, knowing that his weakness gave them strength. Behind every mad king, there is always someone who benefits. And in Charles VI's court, there were many. While he trembled behind closed doors, France became a battlefield, not just of swords and soldiers, but of secrets and schemes. Charles had brothers, powerful ones, princes who wanted more than titles, uncles who were supposed to protect him, but instead reached for his crown. Each one claimed to serve the king. But in truth, they served themselves. And the king's madness made it easy. Whenever Charles disappeared into silence, others stepped in. They ruled in his name. They made deals. They collected taxes. They led armies. But they didn't agree with each other. And that's where the real trouble began. The royal family split into 2 sides. One led by Charles's brother, Louis of Orleans, and the other by his cousin, John the Fearless, Duke of Burgundy. At first, they acted like allies. But their smiles were thin. Their loyalty was paper. Soon, France was not just ruled by a mad king, it was tearing itself apart. Each side claimed they were protecting the throne. Each said the other was using the king for power. And in truth, they were both right. Louis used the king's weak moments to pass new laws and fill his pockets. Burgundy accused him of stealing and whispered rumors that Louis had poisoned the king, perhaps even caused his madness. Some historians believe there's a chance they were right, because in that time, poison wasn't rare, especially in royal courts. And madness could be very useful. A mad king can't question your orders. He can't argue. He can't lead. He can only obey. And Charles obeyed whoever was standing nearest. One day it was Louis. The next, it was Burgundy. They passed the crown back and forth like a toy. And the people of France suffered. Peasants were starving. Soldiers were dying. The English, France's old enemy, were growing stronger. But inside the palace, the game continued. The court became a place of masks, fake smiles, hidden daggers. Everyone acted like the king would recover. But deep down, they knew the truth. Charles was never coming back. And the longer he stayed lost in his glass world, the more dangerous the real world became. The king's madness wasn't just a tragedy. It was a tool, a shield for power, a cover for betrayal, and maybe, just maybe, something done to him on purpose. No one could agree on what truly haunted Charles's mind. Was it madness? Poison? Pressure? Or something far stranger, hidden deep beneath the surface? Sometimes, the most terrifying answer is the one no one can see. What really happened to King Charles VI? Was he truly mad? Was he poisoned? Or was his mind simply broken by pressure, grief, and fear? Even today, centuries later, no one can say for sure. But over time, historians, doctors, and scholars have studied his story, searching for clues in the records he left behind. And the theories they've uncovered are chilling. One of the most common explanations is schizophrenia. Today, we understand this as a serious mental illness. It causes delusions, confusion, memory loss, and fear, just like Charles experienced. Schizophrenia often begins in young adulthood. Charles's first breakdown happened in his mid-20s. The timing matches. He also suffered from episodes, not constant madness. He would go weeks, even months, seeming normal. Then, suddenly, fall into silence, fear, or rage. But this isn't the only theory. Some experts believe Charles's illness may have come from his family bloodline. His mother had a history of mental instability. So did other relatives. In those days, royal families often married within their own bloodlines. That made health problems, both physical and mental, much more common. But others say it wasn't genetics. It wasn't sickness. It was poison. Remember his cousin John the Fearless? His brother Louis? Both had the motive. Both wanted power. Both had access to the king's food, wine, and medicines. And during that time, poisoning was not only possible, it was common. Small doses of mercury, lead, or arsenic could slowly destroy a person's mind, make them forgetful, paranoid, weak. It wouldn't kill them right away, just twist their thoughts, break their judgment, turn a king into a puppet. Was Charles a victim of such a plan? We don't have proof. But the timing is strange. His madness began when the power struggle in court was at its worst. And it grew worse the longer the fight continued. Still, there's another possibility. One darker. One sadder. The pressure of the crown. Charles became king at just 11 years old. By 21, he was expected to save a kingdom in crisis. He faced war, rebellion, and betrayal from all sides. Every word he spoke was watched. Every mistake remembered. His closest advisors were greedy. His family was fighting. His enemies were waiting. Imagine carrying all of that on your back, every single day. Some believe Charles's mind simply couldn't take it. And so, it broke. But maybe the most haunting idea of all is this. What if he believed he was glass, because that's what the world made him feel like? Fragile. Transparent. Easy to shatter. What if being king didn't make him powerful, but made him feel like an object? Something on display. Something that couldn't move without breaking. Something everyone wanted to use, but no one wanted to protect. His glass delusion might not have been random at all. It might have been the perfect reflection of how he truly felt. Vulnerable, alone, and afraid of being shattered by the very people closest to him. And when you look at it that way, can we even call him mad? Or was he the only one who truly saw the truth? That behind the gold, the crown, and the power, he was still human. And like all humans, he could break. After his long and fragile reign ended, the silence didn't stop. France remembered him, but not with honor. His strange illness lingered like a ghost, shaping stories for generations to come. Charles VI ruled for over 40 years, but in truth, many of those years were spent in silence, fear, and confusion. When he died in 1422, France was already broken, torn apart by civil war, betrayal, and the rising power of England. He left behind a kingdom in ruins. But he also left behind something else, a legacy wrapped in mystery. History gave him a cruel name, Charles the Mad. Not Charles the King. Not Charles the Brave. Just mad, it's a label that stuck for centuries. But was that fair? He wasn't the only ruler to suffer from mental illness. Others came before him. Many came after. But few were treated the way Charles was, locked away, passed between enemies, and forgotten while still alive. Even his own son, the future Charles VII, couldn't claim the throne until years later. Why? Because another king had already taken it, Henry V of England. Yes, Charles's madness didn't just affect his court. It changed the course of Europe. While France was distracted, England attacked. Henry V won major battles, took cities, and declared himself heir to the French crown. All while Charles sat behind palace walls, fearing that a single step might shatter his bones. Some say France lost the 100 Years' War not because of swords or armies, but because of a king's broken mind. And yet, even in death, Charles continued to confuse people. His tomb was grand, but his story remained half-told. The records of his illness were kept secret. Doctors gave no real answers. The court moved on, quickly, as if they wanted the world to forget. But stories like his are not easily forgotten. Over time, the tale of the Glass King spread. Writers, poets, and artists became fascinated by the idea. Plays were written. Books were inspired. Scholars debated the truth. And slowly, people began to see Charles in a different way. Not just as a madman, but as a symbol. A reminder that even kings can suffer. Even the most powerful can fall apart. that no amount of gold can protect a person from pain, fear, or loneliness. His legacy is not just madness, it's humanity. And maybe, in the quiet moments, Charles knew that. Maybe he wasn't just afraid of breaking. Maybe he was warning us all that even the strongest people can crack when the world becomes too heavy. Charles's story doesn't end with his death. It leaves behind a question, one that still lingers in the shadows. Was he truly mad? Or was he simply the only one brave enough to show how fragile we all are? Glass doesn't shout when it breaks. It cracks in silence, quick, sharp, and final. And that's how Charles VI faded from history. Not with a war cry, not with a speech, but with a whisper and the sound of a kingdom slowly falling apart. His story is more than just a tale of madness. It's a mystery, a warning, and maybe even a mirror, showing us how fear, pressure, and power can twist even the strongest minds. Charles believed he was made of glass, but maybe it wasn't madness at all. Maybe it was truth, wrapped in metaphor, a cry for help that no one understood. A man screaming quietly in a world too loud to hear him. And now, centuries later, we still wonder, what truly happened behind those palace walls? Was Charles just a victim of illness, or of the people around him? Did they break him? Or did he break under the weight of a crown no man could carry? That's for you to decide. Let us know what you think. Was Charles truly insane, or the only one who saw the world clearly? Leave your thoughts in the comments. Let's uncover the truth together. And if you enjoyed this journey into the shadows of history, there's more to come. Because Charles wasn't the only ruler to go mad. Some saw visions, some heard voices, and some disappeared completely. But those are stories for another night. So, subscribe, hit the like button and comment below. Stay curious, and remember, even kings can shatter. Even history has secrets. And sometimes, the most fragile minds leave the deepest cracks.